The blood on her dress had turned from crimson to rust brown by the time Josephine Harper stumbled into Fort Stockton, Texas. Her boots leaving uneven prints in the dust of the main street as the August sun beat down mercilessly overhead. It was 1878, and the town was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a decrepit fort. But it was the first sign of civilization she had seen in 3 days, and her legs finally gave out as she reached the wooden boardwalk outside the general store. She collapsed there, her dark hair matted with dirt and blood that was not entirely her own, her green eyes wild with something that looked like terror and grief mixed together in equal measure. Quinn Xavier was carrying a sack of grain to his horse when he saw her fall. He was a tall man, lean and hard from years of working cattle drives and breaking horses, with sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of whiskey. He dropped the grain immediately and crossed the street in long strides, his spurs jingling with each step. When he knelt beside her, she flinched so violently that she nearly tumbled off the boardwalk into the street. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice low and steady the way he would with a spooked horse. "I am not going to hurt you." Her eyes focused on him then, taking in his worn leather vest, the gun belt slung low on his hips, the calloused hands reaching toward her. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the storefront wall. "Stay away from me." Quinn stopped moving, holding his hands up where she could see them. "You are hurt. Let me help you." "I do not need help from anyone," she said, but her voice shook, and when she tried to stand, her legs would not support her weight. She slid back down the wall, leaving a smear of dust behind her. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house pushed through, her ample frame moving with surprising speed. "Good Lord, what happened to this poor girl?" "I am fine," Josephine insisted, but the words came out as barely more than a whisper. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges, dark spots dancing in front of her eyes. "She needs a doctor," Quinn said, straightening up. He looked at the crowd. "Someone fetch Doc Morrison." "No doctors," Josephine said, trying again to stand. This time, Quinn caught her elbow to steady her, and she yanked her arm away so hard that she nearly fell again. Her eyes locked on his, and there was something raw and wounded in them that made his chest tighten. "Do not touch me." He held his hands up again, taking a step back. "All right. I will not touch you, but you need help, and you are going to get it whether you like it or not." I said no. Her voice rose, taking on an edge of panic. "I do not need anything from you or anyone else in this town. I just need to keep moving." "Moving where?" Quinn asked, keeping his tone gentle. "You can barely stand." She did not answer. Her jaw clenched, and she looked away from him, staring out at the dusty street as if she could will herself somewhere else entirely. Mrs. Patterson moved closer, her expression softening. "Come now, dear. Let me at least get you cleaned up and fed. You look like you have not eaten in days." "I have money," Josephine said, reaching for a small pouch at her waist. Her fingers fumbled with the strings, and Quinn saw they were trembling. "I can pay for a room." "Nobody is asking you to pay for anything right now," Mrs. Patterson said. She looked at Quinn. "Help me get her to the boarding house." "She does not want me to touch her," Quinn said, though his eyes never left Josephine's face. There were bruises there, he realized now, hidden beneath the dirt. Dark purple shadows along her jaw, a yellowing mark on her temple. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "I can walk," Josephine said. She pushed herself up the wall, using it for support, and took one shaky step forward. Her ankle turned beneath her, and Quinn moved on instinct, catching her before she hit the ground. The moment his hands closed around her arms, she went rigid. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, and when she looked up at him, the fear in her eyes was so intense it was almost palpable. "Let me go." He released her immediately, but stayed close enough to catch her if she fell again. "I am sorry, you were falling." She wrapped her arms around herself and he saw she was shaking, not from weakness, he realized, but from fear, pure, visceral fear of him, of his touch, of something he could not see but that clearly haunted her every moment. "I will walk ahead," he said quietly. "If you fall, I will be there, but I will not touch you unless you say I can." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. Finally, she gave a small, jerky nod. The walk to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house took nearly 20 minutes, though it was only 2 blocks away. Josephine moved like every step caused her pain, and twice she had to stop and lean against a building to catch her breath. Quinn walked 3 paces ahead, as promised, turning back every few seconds to make sure she was still upright. The crowd that had gathered slowly dispersed, though he could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways. Fort Stockton was a small town, and a mysterious woman covered in blood was the most interesting thing to happen here in months. When they finally reached the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson ushered Josephine inside and upstairs to a room at the end of the hall. Quinn waited at the bottom of the stairs, his hat in his hands, unsure whether he should leave or stay. Mrs. Patterson came back down 15 minutes later, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was grim. "That girl has been through hell and back. She has got bruises all over and she flinches every time I move too quickly. And that blood on her dress, it is not all hers." "Did she say what happened?" Quinn asked. "She would not say a word, just sat there like a statue while I helped her wash up and put her in a clean nightgown. She is asleep now, or pretending to be." Mrs. Patterson looked up at him, her eyes sharp. "What are you planning to do, Quinn Xavier?" "What do you mean?" "I mean I saw the look on your face when you caught her. Do not go getting yourself mixed up in something that is none of your business." Quinn turned his hat over in his hands, studying the worn brim. "Someone hurt her, bad. That is clear enough. But she is a grown woman, and if she does not want help, you cannot force it on her." "I am not going to force anything, but I am not going to just walk away either." He looked up at Mrs. Patterson. "She is going to need someone to watch out for her, at least until she gets her strength back. Whatever she is running from might still be following." Mrs. Patterson sighed. "You always were too stubborn for your own good. Fine, but you tread carefully, you hear me? That girl is scared of her own shadow right now. The last thing she needs is some cowboy with a hero complex making things worse." Quinn nodded, setting his hat back on his head. "Can I come by tomorrow, just to check on her? I suppose I cannot stop you. But if she does not want to see you, you will respect that." "Yes, madam." He left the boarding house and walked back to where he had left his horse and the sack of grain. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the dusty street. He loaded the grain onto his horse and swung into the saddle, but instead of heading back to his ranch, he found himself riding to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dalton was sitting behind his desk, picking his teeth with a piece of straw, when Quinn walked in. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a thick gray mustache and eyes that missed very little. "Quinn," he said, leaning back in his chair. "What brings you to town?" A woman showed up this afternoon. Young, early 20s maybe, covered in blood and scared half to death. She is at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house now. Dalton's expression sharpened. "What kind of blood?" "I do not know. Mrs. Patterson says it is not all hers." The sheriff stood, reaching for his hat. "Anyone with her?" "No, she came in alone on foot, would not say what happened or where she came from." "You think someone is following her?" "I think someone hurt her and she ran. Whether they are still following, I cannot say, but it might be worth keeping an eye out for strangers in town." Dalton nodded slowly. "I will make some inquiries, see if anyone knows anything. You get a name?" Quinn realized he had not. "No, but I will find out. You planning on involving yourself in this? She needs help." "That is not what I asked." Dalton studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "Be careful, Quinn. Sometimes people are running for good reason, and sometimes they bring their trouble with them." "I know." "Do you? Because I have known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, and I have seen that look before. You cannot save everyone." "I am not trying to save anyone. I am just trying to help." Dalton snorted. "Keep telling yourself that." Quinn left the sheriff's office and rode home to his ranch, a modest spread about 5 miles outside of town. He had built it up over the past 6 years, starting with nothing but a deed to the land and a stubborn refusal to give up. Now he had a decent herd of cattle, a few horses, and a small house that was more functional than comfortable. It was not much, but it was his, and that meant something. That night, he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, unable to get the image of Josephine's eyes out of his mind. That raw, wounded fear, the way she had flinched from his touch like it burned her. Someone had done that to her. Someone had broken something inside her, and the thought made his blood boil. He was up before dawn the next morning, doing his chores with a distraction that was unusual for him. He fed the animals, mended a section of fence, and was in the saddle heading back to town by mid-morning. He told himself he was just checking on her, making sure she was all right. But the truth was he could not stop thinking about her, and that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Mrs. Patterson answered the door when he knocked, her expression knowing. "She is awake." "But she does not want visitors." Did she say that? She did not have to. She has been sitting in that chair by the window since dawn, staring out at the street like she is waiting for the devil himself to come riding in. "Can I try talking to her, just for a minute, Mrs.?" Patterson hesitated, then sighed. "1 minute, and if she tells you to leave, you leave. Understood?" "Yes, madam." She led him upstairs and knocked softly on the door at the end of the hall. "Miss Harper, you have a visitor." There was a long silence, then a quiet voice. "I do not want any visitors." "It is the man from yesterday," Mrs. Patterson said. "Quinn Xavier. He just wants to make sure you are all right." Another silence. Then so quietly Quinn almost did not hear it. "Tell him to go away, Mrs." Patterson looked at Quinn and raised her eyebrows as if to say, "I told you so." But Quinn stepped closer to the door. "Miss Harper, my name is Quinn Xavier. I am not here to cause you any trouble. I just want to know if there is anything you need, anything I can do to help." "You can leave me alone," came the reply. "I can do that if that is what you really want, but I want you to know that if you need help, you have it. No questions asked." There was no response. Quinn waited a moment longer, then nodded to Mrs. Patterson and headed back down the stairs. He was halfway to the front door when he heard footsteps behind him. "Wait." He turned. Josephine was standing at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She was wearing a simple dress that Mrs. Patterson must have loaned her, and her dark hair was pulled back in a loose braid. In the daylight filtering through the windows, he could see her face more clearly. She was beautiful, he realized, or would have been if not for the bruises and the haunted look in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you want to help me? You do not know me," Quinn chose his words carefully, "because you need help, and because I think maybe you have not had much of that lately." She studied him, her green eyes searching his face for something. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing." "Everyone wants something." "Not me," she laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "You are either a liar or a fool." "Maybe I am both," Quinn said, "but the offer stands. If you need anything, you tell me." She descended a few steps, moving slowly, and he saw her wince as she gripped the railing. "Why should I trust you?" "You should not," he said honestly. "You do not know me. For all you know, I am the worst kind of man, but I am asking you to take a chance. Let me prove that I am not." She reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped a few feet away from him, close enough that he could see the faint scar on her lower lip, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "I do not need anyone to prove anything to me. I just need to be left alone." "All right," Quinn said. He put his hat back on and turned toward the door, but before he left, he looked back at her. "But if you change your mind, I am at the ranch about 5 miles west of here. Anyone in town can tell you how to find it." He walked out into the bright morning sun, untied his horse, and rode out of town. He did not look back, but he could feel her eyes on him the whole way. For the next 3 days, Quinn stayed away from town. He threw himself into work on the ranch, repairing the barn roof, breaking a new horse, driving himself to exhaustion so he would not think about a pair of green eyes filled with fear. But on the 4th day, he rode into town for supplies and could not resist stopping by the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson met him at the door again, but this time her expression was more worried than knowing. "She has not left that room in 3 days. She barely eats, just sits by that window watching the street. I am starting to worry about her." "Has anyone else come looking for her?" "No. But she jumps at every sound. Every time someone rides past, she goes white as a sheet." "Can I see her?" "She still does not want visitors. Please, just for a minute." Mrs. Patterson studied him, then nodded. "Fine, but I am warning you, she is not in a good way." She led him upstairs again and knocked on the door. "Miss Harper, Quinn Xavier is here." "I told you I do not want visitors," came the reply, but the voice was weaker than before. Quinn stepped closer to the door. "Miss Harper, Mrs. Patterson says you have not been eating. That worries me." "Why should you care?" "Because I do." There was a long pause, then, "That is not a good enough reason." "It is the only reason I have." Another pause, then the door opened just a crack. Josephine peered out at him, and he was shocked by how much more fragile she looked. Her face was thinner, her eyes more hollow. The bruises had faded to yellow and green, but somehow that made them look worse. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to eat something. I want you to take care of yourself." "Why?" "Because you matter." She stared at him, and for a moment he thought she might slam the door in his face. But instead her eyes filled with tears. "You do not know anything about me. Then tell me." "I cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am scared," she whispered. And then, so quietly he almost missed it, "I am scared of you." The words hit him like a physical blow. He took a step back, giving her space. "I understand, but I want you to know something. I am not going to hurt you. I would never hurt you. And I know you have no reason to believe that right now, but I am going to prove it to you. I will earn your trust, slowly. However long it takes." She stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You cannot promise that." "I just did." "Why?" "Because everyone deserves to have someone they can trust, and I think maybe you have not had that in a long time." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, then opened the door a little wider. "If I eat something, will you leave me alone? For today, but I will be back tomorrow." "That is not leaving me alone." "No," he agreed, "but it is a start." She almost smiled at that. "Almost. You are very stubborn." "So I have been told." She opened the door all the way and stepped back, allowing him to enter. The room was small and neat, with a bed against one wall and a chair by the window. The view looked out onto the main street, and Quinn could understand why she had chosen this spot. From here, she could see anyone coming. "Will you sit with me while I eat?" she asked, then seemed surprised by her own question. "If you want me to." She nodded, then moved to the chair by the window. Quinn pulled the other chair from beside the bed and sat a respectful distance away, close enough to talk but far enough to give her space. Mrs. Patterson brought up a tray of food a few minutes later and set it on the small table beside Josephine. "There is soup, bread, and some cold chicken," she said. You eat every bit of that, you hear me?" "Yes, madam," Josephine said softly. Mrs. Patterson left, closing the door behind her. Josephine picked up the spoon and stared at the soup for a long moment before taking a small sip. Quinn sat quietly, not speaking, just being there. After a few bites, she looked at him. "Why are you really doing this?" "I told you. Because you need help. There are people who need help everywhere. You do not chase them all down." He considered that. "No. But when I saw you fall in the street, when I saw the fear in your eyes, I knew I could not just walk away. Call it instinct, call it stubbornness, call it whatever you want. But I am here and I am not going anywhere." She took another bite of soup, then set the spoon down. "I killed a man." The words hung in the air between them. Quinn kept his expression neutral, even though his heart had started to race. "Why?" "Because he was going to kill me." She looked out the window, her eyes distant. "My husband, or the man who called himself my husband. We were not legally married. I found that out later. He already had a wife back in Missouri." Quinn said nothing, just waited for her to continue. "His name was Thomas Gentry. We met in San Antonio about 2 years ago. He was charming, attentive. He swept me off my feet, and I was young and stupid enough to believe every word he said. We were married, or so I thought, within a month. He said he had a ranch out west, that we would have a wonderful life together." She picked up the spoon again but did not eat, just turned it over in her fingers. The ranch was real, but the wonderful life was not. The moment we were alone, he changed. He was angry all the time, controlling. He did not like me talking to anyone, going anywhere without his permission. And when I did not do exactly what he wanted, he would. She trailed off, her hand moving unconsciously to her jaw where the bruises had been. Quinn's hands clenched into fists on his knees, but he forced his voice to stay calm. "You do not have to tell me this if you do not want to." "I think I need to," she said. "I have not spoken about it to anyone. Mrs. Patterson tried to ask, but I could not get the words out. But with you, it is different somehow. Maybe because you are still a stranger. Maybe because I know you will not look at me with pity." "How will I look at you?" She met his eyes. "I do not know yet. That is what scares me." He held her gaze. "I am listening. And whatever you tell me, however I look at you, it will not be with judgment. You survived. That is all that matters." She took a shaky breath and continued. "It got worse over time. The hitting turned to beating. He would apologize afterwards, swear it would never happen again, and I wanted so badly to believe him. But it always happened again. I tried to leave twice. The first time, he found me before I even made it to town. The second time, I made it to San Antonio, but he tracked me down and dragged me back. After that, he kept me locked in the house. I was his prisoner." Quinn felt sick listening to her, but he kept his expression controlled, not wanting to scare her by showing his anger. 3 weeks ago, he came home drunk, drunker than usual. He was raging about money, about how everything was my fault. He had a gun and he put it to my head and said he was going to end it. End me. End both of us. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I thought I was going to die." "But you did not," Quinn said softly. "No, because there was a knife on the table. A kitchen knife I had been using to cut vegetables earlier. When he turned away for just a second, I grabbed it, and when he came at me, She closed her eyes. "I stabbed him, in the chest. He fell and there was so much blood, so much blood. I think I stood there for an hour just staring at him, waiting for him to get up, but he did not, and I realized I had killed him." "It was self-defense," Quinn said firmly. "He was going to kill you, I know. But knowing that does not make it easier. I can still see his face. I can still feel the knife going in." She shuddered. "I took what money I could find, got on his horse, and ran. I rode for 2 days before the horse threw a shoe and went lame. I had to leave him behind and continue on foot. That is when I saw Fort Stockton. Does he have family, friends who might come looking for you? He had a brother, Edgar Gentry. He is as mean as Thomas was, maybe meaner. If he finds out what happened, he will come for me. He will want revenge. She looked at Quinn, and the fear was back in her eyes, raw and real. That is why I am scared. Of you, of everyone. Because I do not know who I can trust. For all I know, Edgar could already be here, waiting. Anyone could be working with him. Quinn leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I am not working with anyone, and I am not going to let anyone hurt you. You cannot promise that. I can try. She studied him for a long moment, then picked up the spoon and took another bite of soup. You really are stubborn. You mentioned that already. This time she did smile, just a little. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges fear had carved there. Quinn found himself smiling back. They sat in silence while she ate, and when she had finished about half the food on the tray, she pushed it away. I cannot eat any more. That is all right, you did well. He stood, reaching for his hat. I should go, let you rest. Will you really come back tomorrow if you want me to? She hesitated, then nodded. I think I do, then I will be here. He left the boarding house feeling lighter than he had in days. It was not much, but it was a start. She had opened up to him, trusted him with her story. And that smile, brief as it was, had been genuine. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn fell into a routine. He would do his morning chores at the ranch, then ride into town to visit Josephine. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Slowly, gradually, he watched the fear in her eyes begin to ease. She still flinched at sudden movements, still watched the street with nervous vigilance, but she no longer looked at him like he was going to hurt her. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after she had arrived in Fort Stockton, he found her standing by the window looking restless. I need to get out of this room, she said as soon as he walked in. I feel like I am going to go mad if I stare at these 4 walls for one more day. Do you want to take a walk? She bit her lip, uncertainty crossing her face. What if someone sees me? People have already seen you. Mrs. Patterson has not exactly kept your presence a secret, and the longer you hide, the more suspicious it looks. What if Edgar is here? Then we will deal with it. But you cannot live your whole life in fear, Josephine. At some point you have to step back out into the world. She looked at him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes, fear warring with the need for freedom. Finally, she nodded. All right. But not through the main street. Is there somewhere quieter we could go? There is a creek about a mile outside of town. It is peaceful, private. Would that work? Yes. They left through the back door of the boarding house, and Quinn brought his horse around. He saw Josephine eye the animal nervously. Have you ridden much? Not in a while. Thomas's horse was the last one I was on. This is Copper. He is gentle as a lamb, but if you are not comfortable, we can walk. No, I want to try. She approached the horse slowly, holding out her hand. Copper snuffed at her palm, and she smiled. Hello, boy. Quinn helped her into the saddle, careful to touch her as little as possible, then swung up behind her. He felt her stiffen as his arms came around her to take the reins. Is this all right? Yes, she said, but her voice was tight. They rode slowly, and by the time they reached the creek, some of the tension had left her shoulders. Quinn dismounted first, then helped her down. She immediately moved away, putting distance between them, and he let her have the space. The creek was pretty, shaded by cottonwood trees, the water clear and cool. Josephine walked to the edge and knelt down, trailing her fingers through the water. It is beautiful here. I used to come here a lot when I first moved to Fort Stockton, Quinn said, leaning against a tree. It helped me think. What did you need to think about? Whether I was making the right choice, staying here, building the ranch. I had left everything I knew back in Oklahoma. My family, my friends. It was just me and a dream that felt too big most days. Why did you leave? My father and I did not see eye to eye on much. He wanted me to take over the family business, which was legitimate and boring. I wanted adventure, freedom, so I left." He smiled ruefully. "Turned out freedom was harder than I thought, but I do not regret it." She stood, brushing off her skirt. "Do you miss your family?" "Sometimes. But we write letters. They know I am happy, and that is enough for them." He paused. "What about you? Do you have family?" Her expression closed off. "My parents died when I was 16. Yellow fever. I had an aunt who took me in, but she passed 2 years ago. That is when I met Thomas. I was alone and vulnerable, and he knew it. He used it. I am sorry. So am I." She walked along the edge of the creek, her movements more relaxed than he had seen her before. "Do you know what I miss most? Feeling safe. I do not think I have felt truly safe since before my parents died. And with Thomas, I forgot what it even felt like." "You are safe now," she looked at him. "Am I?" "Yes. Because you say so. Because I will make sure of it." She studied him, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or the beginning of trust. "Why me, Quinn? There has to be a reason you are so determined to help me." He considered the question, then decided on honesty. "When I was 14, my mother had a friend, Sarah. She was married to a man who beat her. Everyone knew it, but no one did anything. They said it was not their business, that what happened between a man and his wife was private. One day, Sarah just disappeared. We heard later that her husband had killed her and buried her out in the woods. He claimed she had run off, and without a body, no one could prove otherwise." Josephine's eyes widened. "That is horrible." It was. "And I remember thinking, even as a kid, that if just one person had stepped in, had offered her help, she might still be alive. I swore then that if I ever saw someone in a situation like that, I would not turn away." He met her gaze. "So that is why. You remind me of Sarah. And I will be damned if I let history repeat itself." She was quiet for a long moment, then walked closer to him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not turning away. You do not have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because not everyone would do what you are doing." They stood there, the creek babbling behind them, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. And for the first time since she had arrived in Fort Stockton, Josephine looked at peace. Over the following weeks, their daily visits continued. Quinn took her back to the creek several more times, and each time, she seemed a little more relaxed. She began to laugh at his stories, to share more of her own past before Thomas. He learned that she loved to read, that she had wanted to be a teacher before circumstances derailed her life. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something substantial, something that would last one day. About 6 weeks after her arrival, Sheriff Dalton stopped by Quinn's ranch just as the sun was setting. Quinn was in the barn brushing down copper when the sheriff rode up. "Evening, Quinn." "Sheriff, what brings you out here?" Dalton dismounted, his expression grim. "Had a man come through town this afternoon asking questions about a woman. Dark hair, green eyes, early 20s. Wearing a dress with blood on it." Quinn's hand stilled on the horse's flank. "Did he give a name?" Said his name was Edgar Gentry. Mean-looking fellow, had a gun on each hip and the look of someone who knows how to use them. Quinn swore under his breath. "Did he say what he wanted with her?" "Said she was his sister-in-law, that she had stolen money from his brother and run off. He is looking to bring her back to face justice." "That is a lie. She did not steal anything, and his brother tried to kill her." Dalton nodded slowly. "I figured as much. I told him I had not seen anyone matching that description. But he is not stupid, Quinn. He is asking around, and someone is going to talk. Mrs. Patterson has already had half a dozen people ask her about the woman staying at her boarding house. Where is he now? Got a room at the hotel. Said he would be staying a few days to look around." Dalton fixed Quinn with a hard look. You need to be careful. This man is dangerous. I know. And you need to figure out what you are going to do about Miss Harper, because if he finds her, there is going to be trouble. I will handle it. How? I do not know yet, but I will figure something out. Dalton sighed. You are in over your head, son. Maybe, but I am not backing down. The sheriff left, and Quinn stood in the barn, his mind racing. He needed to warn Josephine, needed to come up with a plan. But what? He could not exactly hide her forever, and if Edgar was determined enough, he would find her eventually. He rode into town as the last light was fading from the sky. Mrs. Patterson answered the door, her face drawn with worry. He is here, is not he, the man looking for her? Yes. Sheriff Dalton told me. Where is Josephine? Upstairs. I told her to stay in her room, keep the door locked. Quinn took the stairs 2 at a time and knocked softly on her door. Josephine, it is Quinn. The door opened immediately. She looked pale, her eyes wide with fear. Edgar is here, Mrs. Patterson told me. What am I going to do? First, you are going to breathe, Quinn said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. Second, you are going to trust me. Trust you to do what? To keep you safe. How? He is looking for me. He will find me, and when he does. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Quinn wanted to pull her into his arms, to hold her and tell her everything would be all right. But he knew she was not ready for that. So instead, he stood a few feet away and kept his voice calm and steady. He will not find you. Because you are not going to be here. Where will I go? My ranch. Tonight, right now, you will stay there until we figure out what to do about Edgar. But he will look there. He will ask around and someone will tell him about you, about how you have been visiting me. Maybe. But my ranch is 5 miles outside of town, and it is not easy to find if you do not know where you are looking. And even if he does find it, I will be there. I will not let him near you. She looked at him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes. Fear of Edgar, but also fear of what it would mean to go to Quinn's ranch, to be alone with him. I do not know if I can do this. I know you are scared, but I need you to trust me, just a little. Can you do that? She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. What do I need to bring? Just whatever you need for a few days. Pack light. She grabbed a small carpet bag Mrs. Patterson had given her and stuffed a few dresses and personal items inside. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fasten the clasp. Quinn reached out to help, then stopped himself, remembering how she felt about being touched. She saw the movement and looked up at him. It is all right, she said softly. You can help me. He fastened the bag, his fingers brushing against hers. She did not flinch this time, and something warm settled in his chest. They left through the back door again, moving quickly through the shadows. Quinn had tied Copper in the alley behind the boarding house, and he helped Josephine into the saddle before mounting behind her. She leaned back against him slightly, and he took that as a sign of trust. The ride to the ranch felt longer than usual, both of them tense and watchful. But they made it without incident, and Quinn breathed a sigh of relief as his small house came into view in the moonlight. This is it, he said, dismounting and helping her down. It is not much, but it is home. She looked around, taking in the barn, the small corral with his horses, the house itself. It is nice. He led her inside and lit a lamp. The interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a kitchen area and a table, a small bedroom off to one side and a loft above where he slept. You can have the bedroom, I will sleep in the loft. Quinn, this is your home, I cannot take your bed. Yes, you can, and you will, I am not arguing about this. She smiled slightly. Still stubborn. Always. He showed her the bedroom, which contained a bed, a small dresser, and a chair. There is water in the pitcher on the dresser if you need to wash up, and there are extra blankets in the trunk at the foot of the bed if you get cold. Thank you. He started to leave, then turned back. Josephine, you are safe here, I promise. "I know," she said. And for the first time he thought she might actually believe it. The next morning, Quinn was up before dawn, as was his habit. He made coffee and was sitting at the table drinking it when Josephine emerged from the bedroom. She looked more rested than he had seen her in weeks. "Good morning," she said. "Morning. Did you sleep all right? Better than I expected." She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "What happens now? Now I go into town and see what Edgar is up to, see if I can figure out what his plans are." "You are just going to walk up and talk to him?" "Not exactly, but I will keep an eye on him, and I will make sure Sheriff Dalton knows what is going on." "What if he follows you back here?" "He will not. I will make sure of that." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, staring down into the dark liquid. "I do not like you putting yourself at risk for me." "Too bad. I am doing it anyway." She looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes he had not seen before, something warm and soft. "You are a good man, Quinn Xavier." "I am just doing what is right." "No, you are doing more than that, and I want you to know that I see it, I appreciate it." He felt his face warm and took a sip of coffee to cover his discomfort with the compliment. "Well, you are welcome." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes and made his heart do an odd little flip in his chest. He stood abruptly, needing to do something with his hands. "I should get the chores done before I head into town." "Are you going to be all right here alone?" "I think so. What should I do if someone comes?" "There is a rifle over the fireplace." "You know how to use one." "Thomas taught me. He wanted me to be able to protect the ranch when he was gone." Her expression darkened. "Though I think now he was just making sure I knew how to handle a gun in case I ever tried to use one on him." "Can you shoot?" "Well enough." "Then if anyone comes who is not me, you shoot first and ask questions later." "Understood," she nodded. "Be careful, Quinn." "Always am." He left her in the house and went about his morning chores, feeding the animals, mucking out stalls, checking on the cattle in the near pasture. It felt strange knowing she was in his house, sleeping in his bed. He had lived alone for so long that having another person there, especially a woman, especially this woman, felt both unsettling and oddly right. When he rode into town a few hours later, he went straight to the sheriff's office. Dalton was there, looking tired. "Edgar Gentry is making the rounds," the sheriff said without preamble. "He has talked to half the town already. Someone is going to tell him about Miss Harper staying at Mrs. Patterson's place if they have not already. She is not there anymore." "Where is she?" "Somewhere safe." Dalton gave him a long look. "Your ranch." "I did not say that. You did not have to. Quinn, you are playing with fire. This man is not going to give up. Neither am I." "What is your plan? Hide her forever?" "No, I am working on something else." "What?" Quinn hesitated. The idea had come to him sometime during the night, but he had not fully formed it yet. What if she had a reason Edgar could not touch her? A legal reason. Like what? Like if she was married, to someone else, to someone who could protect her. Dalton's eyebrows shot up. "Are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting? Maybe. You cannot marry a woman you barely know just to protect her from her past." "Why not?" "Because that is insane, for one thing. And for another, it does not solve the problem. Edgar can still accuse her of theft, of murder." It was self-defense, which she would have to prove in court, and even if she did, the trial alone would destroy her reputation. "Is that what you want?" Quinn ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "No, but I do not know what else to do. I cannot just hand her over to that man." "He will kill her, I know, and I am not suggesting you do that, but marriage is not the answer here, Quinn." "Then what is?" Dalton leaned back in his chair thinking. What if Edgar left town? What if he decided looking for her was not worth his time? Why would he do that? Because someone convinced him it was not in his best interest to stay. Quinn narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting I threaten him?" "I am not suggesting anything. but I am saying that men like Edgar Gentry respond to strength. If he thinks going after Miss Harper is going to cause him more trouble than it is worth, he might just leave. And if he does not, then we deal with that when the time comes. Quinn left the sheriff's office and spent the rest of the day keeping an eye on Edgar Gentry. The man was exactly as the sheriff had described him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He moved through town with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted, and the cold calculation in his eyes made Quinn's skin crawl. In the late afternoon, Edgar went into the saloon. Quinn waited a few minutes, then followed him inside. The saloon was dim and smoky, smelling of whiskey and unwashed bodies. Edgar was at the bar, talking to the bartender, a thin man named Pete. Quinn walked up and ordered a whiskey, positioning himself close enough to overhear the conversation. "So you are telling me nobody has seen this woman?" Edgar was saying, his voice rough as gravel. "Not that I know of," Pete said, wiping down the bar. "But like I said, I do not pay much attention to who comes and goes." "She is about this tall," Edgar said, holding his hand up to indicate Josephine's height. Dark hair, green eyes. Pretty if you like that sort of thing. Had blood all over her dress when she ran. Blood, huh? Sounds like trouble. She is trouble, all right. Killed my brother and stole his money. I am just looking to bring her back to face justice. Quinn's hand tightened on his glass. Every word out of Edgar's mouth was a lie, and it took all his self-control not to call him out on it right there. "Well, if I see anyone like that, I will let you know," Pete said. Edgar dropped a coin on the bar. "You do that. There is more where that came from for anyone who can point me in the right direction." He drained his whiskey and turned to leave. As he did, his eyes met Quinn's. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Edgar nodded slightly and walked out. Quinn finished his own whiskey, his mind racing. Edgar was offering money for information. That changed things. Someone in this town would talk eventually, whether out of greed or just a loose tongue. He rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, his thoughts troubled. When he walked into the house, he found Josephine in the kitchen. She had made dinner, something that smelled like stew, and the domestic sight of it stopped him in his tracks. "I hope you do not mind," she said, turning from the stove. "I found some vegetables and salt pork, and I thought I would make myself useful." "I do not mind at all. It smells good." They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, she insisted on cleaning up while he sat at the table and watched her move around his kitchen. It felt strange and right all at once, seeing her here in his space, making it feel more like a home than it ever had when he was alone. "Quinn," she said, not turning from the dishes she was washing. "What did you find out today?" He told her everything. About Edgar asking around town, about the offer of money, about the encounter in the saloon. By the time he finished, she had gone very still. "He is not going to give up," she said quietly. "He will find me eventually, not if I have anything to say about it." She turned to face him, drying her hands on a towel. "You cannot protect me forever. Eventually, you will have to go back to your life, and I will have to figure out how to live mine." "What if we figured it out together?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" He stood, moving closer but still keeping a respectful distance. "What if you stayed here? Not just until Edgar leaves, but permanently. What if you made a life here with me?" "Quinn, you cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. We barely know each other." "I know enough. I know you are brave and strong. I know you have been through hell and survived. I know that having you here in my house feels right in a way nothing else ever has." She stared at him, her eyes wide. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I guess I am. I know it is fast. I know you might not feel the same way, but I also know that I care about you, Josephine. And I think maybe you care about me too." "I do," she whispered. "But caring about someone and marrying them are two very different things." "I know. But think about it. If you were my wife, Edgar could not touch you. You would have my protection, my name. And more than that, you would have a home. A real home. A place where you are safe and wanted. Is that the only reason you are asking, to protect me? No. He took a step closer. It is not the only reason. I am asking because when I think about my future, I see you in it, and I want to know if maybe, possibly, you might see me in yours. She was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she crossed the distance between them. She stopped right in front of him, so close he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. I am still scared, she said softly. Of Edgar, of the future, of this. But when I am with you, the fear is not as loud, and maybe that is enough. Maybe that is a place to start. Is that a yes? It is a maybe, which is more than I thought I would ever be able to give anyone, he smiled. I will take a maybe. She reached up tentatively and touched his face, her fingers light as a feather against his jaw. He held perfectly still, letting her explore at her own pace. You really are a good man, Quinn Xavier. You mentioned that before, I know, but I think it bears repeating. Then, before he could say anything else, she leaned up and kissed him. It was soft and brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent electricity racing through his entire body. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. I am sorry. I should have asked. You can kiss me any time you want, Quinn said, his voice rougher than he intended. You do not need permission. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Quinn worked the ranch during the day while Josephine took care of the house. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk, learning more about each other. He told her about growing up in Oklahoma, about his childhood and the adventures he had gotten into. She told him about her parents, about the life she had before Thomas, about her dreams of teaching children someday. And slowly, carefully, they grew closer. She stopped flinching when he moved too quickly. She let him help her down from the horse without tensing. One evening, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she leaned her head on his shoulder. It was such a simple gesture, but it made his heart swell with something he was not quite ready to name. On the 5th day, Quinn rode into town for supplies. He was in the general store when Sheriff Dalton found him. Edgar Gentry left this morning, the sheriff said without preamble. Quinn felt a wave of relief wash over him. Are you sure? Saw him ride out myself. He said he got word that someone matching his description was seen in El Paso. He is heading that direction. Do you think he is really gone? Or is this a trick? I do not know, but I had a deputy follow him for a few miles to make sure he was really leaving. He is headed east, away from here. Quinn set down the bag of flour he had been holding. Thank God. I would not celebrate just yet. He might come back. But for now, at least, Miss Harper is safe. Quinn finished his shopping and rode back to the ranch faster than he probably should have. When he burst through the door, Josephine looked up from the book she was reading, startled. What is it? What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. Edgar left town. He is gone. She stood slowly as if she did not quite believe what she was hearing. He is gone. Yes, Sheriff Dalton saw him leave this morning. For a moment she just stood there processing, then her face crumpled and she started to cry. Not sad tears, but tears of relief and release. Quinn crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. For once she did not resist. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, her hands clutching at his shirt. It is over, he murmured into her hair. You are safe. I was so scared, she choked out. So scared he would find me. I know, but he did not. And now he is gone and you are here and everything is going to be all right. She cried for a long time and he just held her, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red and her face was blotchy, but she was smiling. I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that. You have every right to fall apart. You have been holding it together for so long." She wiped at her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you decide what you want. You can stay here if you want, or you can go somewhere else, start over. Whatever you choose, I will support you." She looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "Do you still want to marry me?" "Yes, more than anything. Even though Edgar is gone. Even though you do not have to protect me anymore. I did not ask you to marry me just to protect you. I asked because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. He had not planned to say them, not yet, but now that they were out, he realized they were true. Somewhere along the way, between the visits at the boarding house and the quiet evenings on the ranch, he had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with her. "You love me," she whispered. "I do. I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I love you, Josephine Harper. And if you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband." Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. You do not have to be scared anymore, I know, because you are here. And you make me feel safe." She took a shaky breath. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." He kissed her then, properly this time, and she kissed him back with a passion that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "When?" she asked. "As soon as possible." "Tomorrow, if we can arrange it," she laughed. "You really are impatient. When I know what I want, I do not see the point in waiting." They rode into town the next morning and went straight to the church. The preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Williams, agreed to marry them that afternoon. Mrs. Patterson, when she heard the news, insisted on being there and on making Josephine a proper wedding dress. "You cannot get married in a day dress," she said firmly. "I have something that will work. It belonged to my daughter, but she is married now and living in Kansas. She would want you to have it." The dress was beautiful, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Josephine stood in front of the mirror in Mrs. Patterson's room, staring at her reflection. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, adjusting the veil. "I cannot believe this is happening," Josephine said. "A few weeks ago I thought my life was over, and now I am getting married to a man who loves me, a man who is kind and patient and good. You deserve this happiness, dear. After everything you have been through, you deserve this." The ceremony was small. Just Quinn and Josephine, Mrs. Patterson, Sheriff Dalton, and Reverend Williams. But it was perfect. When Quinn slipped the simple gold band onto her finger and the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Josephine felt something inside her shift and settle. For the first time in years, she felt like she was home. That night back at the ranch, they lay in bed together, Josephine curled against Quinn's side. He stroked her hair gently and she sighed in contentment. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I was so scared when I met you, scared of you, scared of everyone, but you were patient with me. You earned my trust slowly, just like you promised. You were worth the wait." She kissed him, soft and sweet, and he pulled her closer. They made love for the first time that night, slow and tender, learning each other's bodies in the lamplight. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Josephine felt tears prick her eyes again. "What is wrong?" Quinn asked, concerned. "Nothing. I am just happy. I did not think I would ever feel this way again. Safe and loved and wanted. You are all of those things, and you always will be as long as I am here. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will always be honest with me, even when it is hard. I cannot go through another relationship built on lies. I promise. No lies. Ever. What you see is what you get with me, Josephine. Good, because what I see is more than enough." The weeks turned into months and they settled into married life. Quinn continued to work the ranch, and Josephine took over managing the house. She started a small garden, growing vegetables and herbs. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the Texas plains. And Quinn would tell her about his day while she told him about the book she was reading or the new recipe she had tried. One day, about 4 months after they were married, Josephine was in town at the general store when a woman approached her. She was young, probably around Josephine's age, with blonde hair and a friendly smile. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Xavier?" "I am," Josephine said, still not quite used to the name. "I am Sarah Mitchell. My husband and I just moved to the area. We have 3 children, and I heard you used to want to be a teacher." "I did, yes." "Well, there is no school here in Fort Stockton, and I have been trying to teach my children myself, but I am not very good at it. I was wondering if you might consider tutoring them. I could pay you, of course." Josephine felt a spark of excitement. "I would love to. But I would need to talk to my husband first, of course. If you decide you are interested, we live in the house just past the blacksmith shop." When Josephine told Quinn about the offer that evening, his face lit up. "You should do it. I know teaching was always your dream. But I would need to go into town several times a week. And what about the house, the garden? We will manage. This is important to you, Josephine. I am not going to stand in the way of your dreams." She threw her arms around him, overwhelmed with gratitude. "How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one," he said, kissing the top of her head. Josephine started tutoring the Mitchell children the following week. She quickly discovered she loved it, and word spread. Soon she had 5 more students, then 10. The parents of Fort Stockton began talking about building a proper schoolhouse, and they wanted Josephine to be the teacher. One evening, about 8 months into their marriage, Josephine was feeling unwell. She had been tired for days, and certain smells made her nauseous. Quinn was worried, but she brushed off his concerns. "I am fine, probably just something I ate." But when the symptoms continued for another week, she went to see Doc Morrison. He examined her, asked a few questions, then smiled. "Mrs. Xavier, you are not sick. You are pregnant." Josephine stared at him, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Pregnant? About 2 months along, I would say. Congratulations." She rode home in a daze, her mind whirling. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Quinn's baby. The thought filled her with a joy so intense it almost frightened her. When she told Quinn that evening, he whooped with delight and picked her up, spinning her around. "We are going to be parents. Put me down," she laughed. "You will make me dizzy." He set her down gently, his hands cupping her face. "Are you happy?" "So happy, but also terrified. What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing is going to go wrong, and you are going to be an amazing mother. Our child is the luckiest kid in the world." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Josephine continued teaching until she was about 7 months along, at which point the long rides into town became too uncomfortable. The community of Fort Stockton rallied around them. Mrs. Patterson knitted blankets and tiny clothes. The Mitchell family brought meals. Sheriff Dalton even built a cradle in his spare time. On a warm spring evening in 1879, Josephine went into labor. Quinn rode into town to fetch Doc Morrison, then paced the floor of their bedroom while the doctor and Mrs. Patterson tended to Josephine. The sounds of her pain nearly drove him mad, but every time he tried to go to her, Mrs. Patterson shooed him out. "She is fine. This is normal. Now stop hovering and let us work." After what felt like an eternity but was actually only about 6 hours, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a baby. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, beaming. "You have a son, Quinn. A healthy baby boy." He rushed past her into the room. Josephine was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. When she looked up at him, her eyes were shining with tears. "Look at him, Quinn. Look at our son." He sat on the edge of the bed, peering down at the tiny face. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were screwed up tight. He was perfect. "What should we name him?" Josephine asked. They had discussed names for weeks but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Quinn knew Thomas. Josephine looked up at him, surprised. "Really? After my—" "No, not after him, but I think it is time to take that name back. Make it mean something good instead of something painful. Our son will be Thomas Xavier, and he will be nothing like the man who hurt you. He will be kind and honest and strong." Tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks. "I love that. Thomas Xavier, it is perfect." Baby Thomas was a good baby, rarely fussy, with a ready smile that appeared at about 6 weeks old. Quinn was besotted. He would come in from the fields covered in dirt and sweat and immediately wash up so he could hold his son. Josephine would find him in the evenings, sitting in the rocking chair with Thomas on his chest, both of them sound asleep. When Thomas was 3 months old, Josephine returned to teaching. Mrs. Patterson volunteered to watch the baby during the day, insisting she needed something to keep her busy now that her own children were grown. Life settled into a new rhythm. Quinn worked the ranch, which was growing steadily. He hired a ranch hand, a young man named Peter who was eager to learn. Josephine taught school 3 days a week and spent the rest of her time with Thomas and managing their home. They were busy, tired, and happier than either of them had ever imagined possible. One afternoon, about a year after Thomas was born, Sheriff Dalton stopped by the ranch. He dismounted and stood awkwardly in the yard, his hat in his hands. "Quinn, Josephine, I need to tell you something." They both came out onto the porch, Josephine holding Thomas on her hip. "What is it?" Quinn asked. "I got word from a sheriff down in El Paso. Edgar Gentry is dead." Josephine went very still. "What happened?" "Got into a fight with a man over a card game. The other man shot him. It was ruled self-defense." Dalton looked at Josephine. "I thought you should know. He cannot come after you now. You are truly free." Josephine felt a weight she had not even realized she was carrying lift from her shoulders. "Thank you for telling us." After Dalton left, she sat on the porch steps, Thomas playing with a wooden toy at her feet. Quinn sat beside her, taking her hand. "How do you feel?" he asked, relieved. And sad. Not for Edgar, but for the whole situation. For the fact that Thomas Gentry became the man he was, that Edgar followed the same path. It is all just so tragic. "You have a good heart, Josephine Xavier." "I have you," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That is all I need." As Thomas grew, he proved to be a curious, energetic child. He was walking by 10 months, running by 11, and into everything by his first birthday. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. Quinn taught him to ride when he was barely 3, putting him on the gentlest horse on the ranch and leading him around the corral. When Thomas was 4, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, they were both calmer about it, though no less excited. The second baby, a girl they named Margaret Rose, was born on a snowy December night. She had Quinn's coloring with light brown hair and hazel eyes, but Josephine's delicate features. "2 perfect children," Quinn said, holding Margaret while Thomas climbed onto the bed to meet his new sister. "We are the luckiest people alive." "We are," Josephine agreed, watching as Thomas gently touched his sister's tiny hand. "We really are." The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas started school when he was 6, learning from his mother alongside the other children of Fort Stockton. Margaret was quieter than her brother, content to sit for hours with a book or drawing pictures. Quinn expanded the ranch, building a bigger house to accommodate their growing family. The new house had separate bedrooms for the children, a proper parlor, and even a small library where Josephine could keep her ever-growing collection of books. When Thomas was 8 and Margaret was 4, Josephine found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first two. She was older now, 31, and she tired more easily. But when their third child was born, another boy they named Samuel, all the discomfort was forgotten. 3 children, Quinn marveled, looking at their family gathered around the dinner table a few months after Samuel's birth. This house is full of noise and chaos and love. Just like it should be, Josephine said, smiling at him across the table. One evening when Thomas was 12, Margaret 8, and Samuel 4, the family was sitting on the porch after dinner. Thomas was reading aloud from a book about explorers, his voice animated as he described their adventures. Margaret was braiding flowers into a crown. Samuel was chasing fireflies in the yard. Quinn and Josephine sat side by side in the rocking chairs Quinn had made, his hand holding hers. "Do you ever think about where you would be if you had not come to Fort Stockton?" Quinn asked quietly. Josephine was silent for a moment, thinking. "Dead, probably. Or still trapped in that nightmare with Thomas Gentry. I try not to think about it too much. It is too painful. I think about it sometimes, about how you stumbled into town covered in blood and terrified, about how close I came to just walking away, minding my own business like everyone else wanted me to. But you did not walk away. No, best decision I ever made." She squeezed his hand. "Remember what I said to you that day at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, when I told you I was scared of you? I remember everything about those first days. You said you would earn my trust slowly, and you did. You were so patient with me, Quinn. You never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. You just waited, and that made all the difference. You were worth waiting for. You are worth everything." She leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet. After all these years, after everything they had been through, the love between them had only grown stronger. "Mama, Papa, look," Samuel called from the yard. "I caught a firefly." They looked over to see their youngest son standing with his hands cupped, a soft glow emanating from between his fingers. His face was alight with wonder. "That is wonderful, sweetheart," Josephine called. "Now let it go so it can fly home to its family." Samuel opened his hands and they watched the firefly spiral up into the darkening sky, joining its fellows in their evening dance. "I love our life," Josephine said softly. "So do I," Quinn replied. "Every single day of it." As the years continued to pass, their children grew. Thomas proved to have his father's talent with horses and his mother's love of learning. He talked about going to university one day, maybe becoming a veterinarian. Margaret discovered a passion for music and spent hours at the piano Quinn bought for her 13th birthday. Samuel was the most like his father, content to work the ranch and already declaring at age 7 that he never wanted to live anywhere else. Quinn and Josephine aged together, their hair going gray, their faces acquiring lines, but their love never dimming. They still sat on the porch together every evening, still held hands, still looked at each other like they were the most precious thing in the world. One day, when they were both in their 50s and their children grown and starting families of their own, Josephine was going through some old papers and found the blood-stained dress she had been wearing the day she arrived in Fort Stockton. She had kept it all these years, tucked away in the back of a trunk, though she was not sure why. She brought it out to the porch where Quinn was sitting, watching the sunset. "Look what I found." He looked at the dress, remembering. "I thought you had thrown that away years ago. I meant to. But I could never quite bring myself to do it. I think it reminded me of how far I had come, of how much my life had changed." She sat beside him, the dress draped across her lap. "But I do not need it anymore. I do not need to remember where I came from. All that matters is where I am now." "What are you going to do with it? Burn it? Let it go, all of it? The fear, the pain, the past? I am ready." They built a small fire in the yard that evening, and Josephine threw the dress into the flames. They watched it burn, the fabric curling and blackening until there was nothing left but ash. Quinn wrapped his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him. "It is really over," she said. "All of it." "It has been over for a long time," Quinn said. "But I understand needing to let it go one last time. I love you, Quinn Xavier. I have loved you since that day you promised to earn my trust slowly. You kept that promise. Every single day you kept it. And I will keep it for the rest of my life." They stayed there until the fire burned down to embers, then went inside to the home they had built together, filled with the memories of a lifetime of love. Thomas, their eldest, married at 24 and brought his wife Catherine to live on the ranch. They built a house nearby, and soon there were grandchildren running through the fields where Quinn and Josephine's children had once played. Margaret moved to Dallas to study at a music conservatory, but came home every summer, filling the house with songs. Samuel, true to his word, stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father and learning everything Quinn could teach him about managing the land and the animals. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. There were now 4 grandchildren, with another on the way. The house was chaos, filled with laughter and noise and the kind of joyful mayhem that comes from 3 generations under one roof. As the sun set, Quinn and Josephine snuck away from the party, walking hand in hand to the creek where he had first taken her all those years ago. It looked the same, the water still clear and cool, the cottonwood trees still providing shade. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Quinn asked. "Of course, I was so scared. Scared of Edgar, scared of the future, scared of you, but you were patient. You gave me space to breathe, to heal. And look at us now. 25 years, 3 children, 4 grandchildren, a life I never imagined possible." "It is more than I ever dreamed of," Josephine said. "When I ran from Thomas Gentry's ranch, when I stumbled into Fort Stockton more dead than alive, I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend whatever time I had left just surviving, just trying to get through each day. But then I met you. And I met you, the woman who would change my entire life. You changed mine first. I think we changed each other's." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me we will grow old together. That we will sit on that porch and watch our grandchildren and great-grandchildren grow up. That we will have 50 more anniversaries just like this one." "I promise," he said, pulling her close. "Though 50 might be pushing it, I will be over 100. She laughed. "Then we will aim for as many as we can get." He kissed her there by the creek, in the place where she had first started to feel safe, where the walls around her heart had first begun to crack. And as the sun set over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Josephine Harper Xavier knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The party continued late into the night. There was music and dancing and so much food that the table groaned under the weight of it. Thomas gave a toast to his parents, talking about how their love had been an example to him his entire life. Margaret played a song she had composed for the occasion, a beautiful piece that brought tears to Josephine's eyes. Samuel, never comfortable with public speaking, simply raised his glass and said, "To the best parents anyone could ask for." As the guests finally began to leave and the house quieted down, Quinn and Josephine sat on their porch one more time. This had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time at the end of each day when they could just be together. 25 years, Josephine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean. Sometimes I still see you as that terrified young woman who collapsed in the street, and then I look at you now, and I see all the strength and courage you have always had, just waiting for a chance to show itself. You brought that out in me. You made me believe I could be strong. No. You were always strong. I just gave you a safe place to remember that." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night. In the distance, they could hear Samuel talking to the horses, his voice low and soothing. From the guest room came the sound of a baby crying, quickly soothed. Their life, their family, their legacy. "You have any regrets?" Josephine asked. Quinn thought about it. "No, not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. That I wasted so much time with the wrong person before I found the right one. But if you had not gone through all of that, you would not have ended up here, in Fort Stockton, on my ranch, in my life." "That is a fair point." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Thomas Gentry ever loved me?" "Even a little?" It was a question she had asked herself many times over the years but had never voiced out loud. Quinn considered it carefully before answering. "I do not know. Maybe in his own twisted way he thought he did, but what he felt was not love. Love does not hurt. Love does not control or frighten or demean. Love lifts up. Love gives freedom. What you and I have, that is love. What he had was possession and cruelty disguised as affection. You are right. I know you are. Sometimes I just wonder if there was ever a moment when he saw me as a person instead of a thing." "Does it matter?" She thought about that. "No, I suppose it does not. He is gone and I am here. I have a beautiful life with a man who truly loves me and 3 incredible children. What he thought or felt is irrelevant." "Exactly." As they prepared for bed that night, moving through the routine they had established over decades of marriage, Josephine felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For Quinn, for their children, for the home they had built, for the community that had welcomed her and never asked too many questions about her past. She climbed into bed beside her husband, and he immediately pulled her close, his arm around her waist. This, too, was part of their ritual. No matter how busy the day had been, no matter what challenges they faced, they always ended it together like this. "I love you, Josephine Xavier," Quinn murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Quinn Xavier, more than words can say." The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows. They lost Mrs. Patterson when she was 92, a loss that hit them both hard. She had been Josephine's first friend in Fort Stockton, the woman who had taken her in and asked no questions. Sheriff Dalton passed a few years later, and Quinn stood at his graveside and remembered the man who had helped them when they needed it most. But there were far more joys than sorrows. Thomas and Catherine had 4 children in total. Margaret married a fellow musician and settled in Austin, though she visited Fort Stockton several times a year. Samuel married a local girl named Emma, and they had 3 children who were being raised on the ranch alongside their cousins. Quinn taught all of his grandchildren to ride, just as he had taught their parents. Josephine read to them on the porch, introducing them to the books she loved. And every Sunday, the entire family gathered for dinner, 3 generations around the table, laughing and arguing and loving each other loudly. When Quinn was 68 and Josephine 65, they took a trip back to San Antonio. It was the first time Josephine had been back since her disastrous marriage to Thomas Gentry, and she was nervous. But Quinn held her hand the entire time, and they walked through the streets where she had once been young and naive. "I barely recognize it," she said, looking around at the changes. "It is so much bigger now." "Everything changes," Quinn said. "That is the nature of life." They visited the courthouse where she had thought she was getting married all those years ago. The building was the same, but the clerk behind the desk was different. Josephine felt nothing looking at it. No anger, no regret, no pain. Just a vague sense of disconnection, as if that young woman who had stood there so long ago was someone else entirely. "I am glad we came," she said as they left. "I needed to see that it has no power over me anymore. That chapter of my life is closed." "And the current chapter," Quinn asked, "is the best one yet?" They made one more stop before leaving San Antonio. At a small cemetery on the edge of town, Josephine placed flowers on two graves, her parents buried side by side. She had not been back since the day they died, guilt and grief keeping her away. "I am sorry it took me so long," she said, kneeling between the graves. "I am sorry I let so much time pass, but I wanted you to know that I am all right. More than all right, I am happy. I have a husband who loves me and 3 beautiful children and grandchildren I cannot even count anymore. I have a good life, the life you would have wanted for me." Quinn stood a respectful distance away, giving her privacy for this moment. When she was finished, she stood and took his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For bringing me here, for understanding that I needed to do this. You never need to thank me for loving you, Josephine. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." They returned to Fort Stockton and to their life there. The town had grown over the years, no longer the dusty outpost it had been when Josephine first stumbled in. There was a proper school now, where Josephine still taught part-time. There was a library, a larger general store, even a small hotel. But the heart of it remained the same. It was still a place where people knew each other, where neighbors helped neighbors, where community mattered. On a warm evening in late spring, when Quinn was 73 and Josephine 70, they were sitting on their porch as usual when Samuel came to find them. His face was serious. "Pa, we need to talk about the ranch." Quinn gestured for him to sit. "What about it? You are getting older, both of you. And I know you want to keep working, but the truth is, the ranch is getting too big for you to manage. I think it is time we made it official. Time you signed it over to me and let me take the lead." Quinn and Josephine exchanged a look. They had been expecting this conversation for a while. Samuel was right. They were getting older and the work was getting harder. It was time. "You are right," Quinn said. "The ranch is yours, son. It has been for a while, really. We will go into town tomorrow and make it legal." Samuel's relief was visible. "Thank you. I promise I will take care of it, honor everything you built." "I know you will. You already have." After Samuel left, Josephine took Quinn's hand. "Are you all right with that? Giving up the ranch?" "We are not giving it up. We are passing it on. There is a difference. And yes, I am all right with it. More than all right. We built something good here and now it is time to let the next generation take over. When did we get so old?" Josephine asked with a laugh. "I have no idea, but we are still here, still together. That is what matters." They continued to live on the ranch, but their daily responsibilities decreased. Samuel took over the day-to-day operations, and Quinn found himself with more free time than he had had in decades. He spent it building things: a new chicken coop, a treehouse for the grandchildren, a gazebo by the creek. Josephine spent her time with her books and her grandchildren, finally writing the memoirs she had been thinking about for years. She was careful in how she wrote about her past, changing names and locations, but the core of the story was true. A young woman trapped in an abusive relationship, her escape, her arrival in a small Texas town, and the cowboy who helped her rebuild her life. She wrote about fear and trust and the slow process of healing. And she wrote about love, the real kind, the kind that lasted. When she finished, she gave the manuscript to Quinn to read. He sat in his favorite chair on the porch, reading for hours while she pretended to work in the garden but was really watching him nervously. When he finally finished, he set the pages down and looked at her. "This is beautiful, Josephine. Painful in places, but beautiful. You think I should try to get it published? I think you should do whatever feels right to you. But I also think there are probably other women out there who need to read this, who need to know they can survive and thrive after something like what you went through. She published the book under a pseudonym, and it sold modestly but steadily. Every few months, she would receive a letter from a reader thanking her for telling her story, for giving them hope. Those letters meant more to her than any amount of money or recognition could have. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered again. The grandchildren were older now, some of them married with children of their own. There were great-grandchildren running around, and Quinn joked that he had lost count of how many descendants he had. "I think it is somewhere around 20, Josephine said, laughing. "But do not quote me on that." The celebration was even larger than the 25th anniversary had been. There was a band, and Quinn danced with Josephine under the stars, holding her as close as he had on their wedding day. 40 years, he said, his voice full of wonder. Where did the time go? I do not know, but I would not trade a single moment of it, not even the hard parts. Especially not the hard parts. They made the good parts that much sweeter. He kissed her, and around them their family cheered and applauded. This was their legacy, not just the ranch or the house or the material things they would leave behind, but this. The love that had started with a scared woman and a patient cowboy and had grown into something that touched everyone around them. As the night wore on, and the party showed no signs of slowing down, Quinn and Josephine once again slipped away to the creek. It had become their place over the years, the spot they returned to when they needed to remember how far they had come. "You ever think about that day?" Josephine asked. "When you found me in the street, sometimes, but not as much anymore. It feels like a different lifetime." "It was a different lifetime. I was a different person then." "No, you were always you. You just needed to remember who that was." She leaned against him, and they stood there in the darkness, listening to the creek and the distant sounds of music from the party. Above them, the stars stretched out in an endless canopy, the same stars that had been there 40 years ago when two broken people found each other and built something beautiful. "Thank you," Josephine whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For being patient when I needed patience. For loving me when I did not think I could be loved. Josephine Xavier, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They stayed at the creek until they heard Samuel calling for them, letting them know they were cutting the cake. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they emerged from the darkness into the light and music and laughter, their family erupted in cheers. The years continued, each one a gift. Quinn's health began to fail when he was 79. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for almost 8 decades. He moved slower, tired more easily, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Josephine never wavered. On a quiet afternoon in autumn, a few months after his 80th birthday, he was sitting on the porch when he had a heart attack. Josephine was in the kitchen and heard him call out. By the time she reached him, he was unconscious. Samuel rode for the doctor, but they all knew it was too late. Doc Morrison examined him and shook his head. "I am sorry, Josephine. His heart just gave out. He is gone." She sat beside his body for hours, holding his hand, unable to accept that he was really gone. This man who had been her whole world for 42 years. The man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her everything. The funeral was the largest Fort Stockton had ever seen. People came from all over Texas, former ranch hands and business associates and friends and family. They told stories about Quinn, about his integrity and kindness and stubborn determination to do the right thing. Josephine stood at the graveside and watched them lower his coffin into the ground. She felt numb, disconnected from reality. How was she supposed to continue without him? He had been her anchor, her safe harbor for so long. She did not know how to be without him, but she found a way, as she always had. Her children rallied around her, making sure she was never alone for long. The grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with noise and life. And slowly, painfully, she learned to navigate this new reality. She continued to live on the ranch, in the house they had built together. She walked to the creek often, standing in the spot where he had brought her all those years ago, where she had first started to feel safe. And she talked to him, telling him about her days, about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about all the little things he would have wanted to know. 5 years after Quinn's death, Josephine was sitting on the porch when she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She knew immediately what was happening. Her own heart, worn out from years of beating, was finally giving up. She was not scared. If anything, she felt a sense of peace. She had lived a long, full life. She had known great love and deep happiness. She had survived things that should have destroyed her and had come out stronger on the other side. Samuel found her there an hour later, slumped in the rocking chair Quinn had made for her so many years ago. She had a smile on her face. They buried her next to Quinn, their graves side by side just as they had spent their lives. On the headstone, below her name and dates, Samuel had inscribed a simple message. She was loved. At the funeral, Thomas stood to speak about his mother. He was in his 60s now, with gray in his hair and grandchildren of his own, but his voice was strong and clear. "My mother was the strongest person I have ever known," he said. "She survived things that would have broken most people. And not only did she survive, she thrived. She built a life full of love and joy and meaning. And she did it all because one day, a cowboy saw her fall in the street and decided to help. He saw past her fear and her pain to the incredible woman underneath. And together, they showed all of us what real love looks like." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "She used to tell me that my father earned her trust slowly, that he was patient and kind and never pushed her further than she was ready to go. And because of that patience, because of that love, she was able to heal. She was able to become the woman she was always meant to be. That is the legacy she leaves us. Not just her words or her work, but the example of her life. The proof that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. There is always a chance for something better." After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch one last time. It was bittersweet, being in the house without Quinn and Josephine, but their presence was everywhere. In the books lining the library shelves, in the photographs covering every surface, in the trees they had planted and the gardens they had tended. Margaret sat at the piano and played the song she had composed for their 25th anniversary. Samuel walked through the house, touching things, remembering. Thomas stood on the porch, looking out at the land his parents had loved, and felt tears stream down his face. They were gone, but they were not forgotten. The story of Quinn Xavier and Josephine Harper would be passed down through generations. The tale of a woman who stumbled into a small Texas town, covered in blood and fear, and the cowboy who promised to earn her trust slowly. A love story that proved patience and kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Xavier Ranch. A man and a woman, holding hands and watching the sunset, eternal and at peace. Their story became legend in Fort Stockton. The school that Josephine had helped establish was named in her honor. The ranch, still run by Samuel and his descendants, became known for its ethical treatment of animals and employees, a direct result of the values Quinn had instilled. And Josephine's memoir, though written under a pseudonym, continued to sell and help women who found themselves in similar situations. But more than any of that, Their legacy lived on in the family they created. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried pieces of both of them forward into the future, who told the story of how their family began with an act of compassion, and how that single act had rippled out to touch hundreds of lives. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the fear or the pain that had brought Josephine to Fort Stockton, but the love and trust that had kept her there. The cowboy who had seen a woman in need and had not looked away. The promise to earn her trust slowly, and the lifetime spent keeping that promise. They had built something beautiful together. A life, a family, a love that transcended time. And though they were gone, their story remained, a testament to the power of patience, kindness, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. In the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees by the creek, you could almost hear it. The echo of two souls who had found each other against all odds and had refused to let go. Who had proven that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth everything. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Quinn Xavier held Josephine's hand and smiled, because they had done it. They had built a life worth living, a love worth remembering, and a legacy worth leaving behind. Their story was complete, and it was beautiful.